I don't know if you've read this book called Foucault's Pendulum. It's by a guy called Umberto Eco, Italian writer, and he wrote it in 1988. And I thought I'd just share with you a couple of things from it, because this was kind of a turning point for me. And I suppose this comes back to this idea. So everyone said, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. It seems to be a phrase that everyone likes.
But the problem with that, real quick, you can't throw out any of the water. That's the gist I'm getting every time someone says that comment.
Yeah, it's not good. But the thing is, I'm not actually throwing the baby out with the bathwater. But what I'd like to do is share some of this. So it says in this paragraph, it says, the Celts, however, believed it was enough to discover the global configuration of the currents. So these currents that he's talking about here are the telluric currents, the electric currents that are just underneath the surface of the earth. And he says that's why they erected megaliths. The menhirs had sensitive devices like electric valves planted at points where the currents branch and change direction. The lays marked the routes of the currents already identified. The dolmens were chambers of accumulated energy where the druids with geomantic tools attempted to map by extrapolation the global design. The cromlechs and Stonehenge were macrocosmic observatories from which they studied the pattern of the constellations in order to divine the pattern of the currents. Because as the tabula, I can't say that, tells us, what is above is isomorphic to what is below. So it's this idea of, what's above, as above, so below. And these currents are actually a thing. The ley lines it's well established, everyone loves them, deep conspiracy, pseudo kind of science. But these currents, they go back to this guy, Athanasius Kircher. They call him the last Renaissance man, so the 1600s. And he produced all these weird drawings of these currents. And this is supposed to be the fires under the earth or within the earth. And he's got loads of this stuff. And what's interesting is that in this same time period, they're mapping the constellations above. So it's this idea that what's underneath is connected to what's above, that idea of the black sun or a sort of sun within the earth at the center. And what's interesting is that he talks about constellations. There's, I think, 88 constellations in the stars above, and it kind of relates to the analemma of the sun over the year, the 8. So that idea that, you've got 8 from the sun, 8 below, constellations, 8, 8. So it's all deep in the occult, these currents. But what stopped the Templars once they knew the secret? The problem was how to exploit it. Between knowing and know-how, there was a gap. So instructed by the diabolical St. Bernard, the Templars replaced the menhirs, poor Celtic valves, with Gothic cathedrals, far more sensitive and powerful. Their subterranean crypts containing black virgins, I don't know what the black virgins are about, in direct contact with the radioactive strata. And they covered Europe with a network of receiver-transmitter stations communicating to one another the power and the direction, flow and the tension of the telluric currents. And this is a menhir, so this Celtic stone that's these megalithic blocks that are everywhere. And he's saying here that they replaced this with cathedrals that were more powerful. And then this is the big one. Now we had the entire modern age filled with industrious moles tunneling through the earth, spying on the planet from below. But there had to be something else, another venture the Baconians had set in motion, whose stages were before everyone's eyes. Blah, 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 blah. And he says, the ground had been punctured and the deep strata tested, but the Celts and the Templars had not confined themselves to digging wells. They had planted their stations and aimed them straight at the heavens to communicate from megalith to megalith and to catch the influences of the stars. The Eiffel Tower, he said to us the next morning, why didn't we think of it before? The metal megalith, the menhir of the last Celts, the hollow spire taller than all Gothic spires. And he goes on and on and on, and he talks about Ares Rock and stuff in Egypt, the Statue of Liberty, Mount Rushmore, and them acting as antennas, the Empire State Building. And it's funny because the narrator says the entire history of science had to be reread. And the thing is, I was thinking about it because I suppose what people would say is, this guy's a Mason and he knows. But what this book's all about, it's all about conspiracies. And I really like it. And it's fantastic. It's like a encyclopedia of conspiracies. And the plot line is a group of friends that get together with their computer and start inputting all this data in. And the computer starts to generate connections. And they formulate this massive conspiracy that there is a group of rulers in the world that live below in the subterranean tunnels. And a lot of these structures were to channel these telluric currents from below and then act as antennas between each other to communicate data about the stars and whatnot. So it's all very cosmic. The genius of this guy, what I really like about him, he's a medieval scholar. He's actually an academic. Famously, he had a library of like 40,000 books or something. But the thing that's interesting is that this book that he's written with all these conspiracies, the A to Z of conspiracies, they're all backed up at the beginning of each chapter with like excerpts from much older books. So you've got people in the 1800s talking about this idea of these megaliths acting as channelers of these currents and connecting to each other. And, you know, same with the subterranean sort of underworld of the controllers. This was part of a turning point for me, because I realized that actually this conspiracy it's not new. This isn't a YouTube thing. I mean, I know they've called it Tartaria, and they've talked about the map of, you know, Russia, but this thing's actually quite old, and it goes back, and you can trace it through all these mystic secret societies and, yeah, all the occult, so the Rosicrucians, the Templars, the Celts, Druids, all of that stuff. It's all there. So no one online has actually invented this. So that was immediately interesting to me. I did wonder where it came from, but it's there in the literature. But then what was also interesting, and it comes back to this idea of throwing the baby out. I thought, well, actually, maybe there is something to this, you know, that everything's a half-truth. And this guy's basing, you know, his wonderful book off of all this other literature that exists. So throughout time, people have talked about this stuff. So there's got to be something to it. Some structures that were actually very old telluric current sort of channelers. And this telluric current stuff, I looked into it. They actually use these quite a lot to, you know, things like geothermal exploration, mining exploration, petroleum, mapping of fault zones, groundwater exploration, monitoring. And you can produce earth batteries from them, which they connect into the earth, and you can produce electricity. So there is something definitely to this. He came in and he said, had drawn a labyrinth, a stylized image of the system of subterranean currents. We sought an illustration of the labyrinth of Chartres Cathedral, a solar clock, a compass card, a vein system, and a global chart of the telluric tides. So this is Chartres Cathedral, and that's the labyrinth in it. And I was thinking that's a really interesting idea, because I'd always thought of the labyrinth as something that, you know, you get lost in. But what if it was actually like a map? To me, it was a really cool idea. So it inspired this. And then I thought about all the pseudo stone and the artificial stone. And I thought, well, actually, what if there is some structures that were once working in this way or used to tap into these telluric currents, and they've kind of flooded the world with similar structures, these, you know, the obelisks or the pyramids and the Gothic spires everywhere. And what if it was a case of going through everything and trying to work out what could be a real one and what could not? And that's kind of the premise of this Labyrinth series that I wanted to do, that I'm still on the fence about whether I will do it or not. But I think there is something to that. And I like the idea of, to go back to the idea of the 88 constellations, is that what he's saying is that when these currents cross, it mirrors a constellation above. So I thought, well, what if there were 88 structures? And maybe that was, you know, if you really wanted to conspiracize it, maybe that was a big part of the plan, is to make as many of these structures all over the place as possible. So when people did start doing the ley line, they're connecting all these lines everywhere, drawing all these connections, you know, like the 5-6 pointed stars, all the pareidolia, and seeing the patterns that aren't really there, because they're connecting up structures that are just pseudo stone, or were just put up in the image of perhaps something previous. I don't want to throw the baby out, because maybe there's something to it, but then you'd have to, the challenge is to go through all the stuff that isn't. These structures are possible to build. It's not an alien advanced civilization. We can definitely do it. But perhaps some of them did have a previous function. perhaps. And it's got blown out of proportion to the point where it's become historical erasure, like we can't do anything. But maybe somewhere there is an ancient cathedral that did have a lost function.
I'm blaming the diabolical St. Bernard for all of this. I went backwards and I started watching the Secret Key Activators videos, holographic disclosure. And they were talking about all of this. And I'm so guilty because I accused them of being Masons. I did it. But to be fair, the guy named himself Martin Freeman. And then there was a second guy, and he also gave himself like a very Masonic name. But these videos came out back in like 2006, I think it was, or maybe 2008. And then it switched over to a different program called The Unmasking.
Everything is energy. The illuminated Cabal view everything as energy and the way energy flows. This must be thoroughly understood. This is the Kabbalistic manipulation of energy. Christian churches were constructed on ley lines, areas on Earth that have increased geomagnetic energy, in order to increase the energy for their program, to sharpen our thoughts for stronger electrical output, and to affect the environment. If a knowledgeable person uses earth energy and thought energy, it amplifies the energy behind the thoughts through will. Christian churches were constructed to replace the pagan temples that were destroyed. Special rituals were performed at these energy crossings in the earth. Humans and animals were sacrificed to instill extreme fear in the victims. The fear energy that they used for control was pumped into these vortexes of earth energies. Sports arenas are also built on these energy lines to harness the energies. The highest levels of the Cabal have also built some of their castles on these lines.
And it was shocking to go back and hear it because I forgot all about it. I did watch it back in the day, but watching it with post-Tartarian eyes, I was like, how did I miss this and not even catch what they were talking about? With cathedrals, they describe them as being on ley lines, and rather than inputting energy, they output energy. We as humans, we're all antennas ourselves. So whatever they're pumping out into the atmosphere, we're collecting it. So the concept was put as much fear into the spider web as you can, and then people themselves resonate with it and they themselves become more fearful. So that was the narrative that the channel was pushing on what these buildings are for.
There might be something to it that goes way back, but it's got blown out of proportion and now has become almost farcical. I don't know if you feel the same way, but I almost get a joy now in finding a very reasonable explanation for something that I thought was impossible or couldn't be done, or there wasn't an explanation for before. I found this article this morning, I think. I've got two. This one was this morning, yeah. I haven't read it properly, but early uses of electricity in American agriculture, and documented how they were using electricity quite early on in the 1800s to grow crops and like vitalize the crops that yielded a really good crop. And this is, again, part of that. And I've done episodes on it in the past of, this idea they all had free energy and it was marvelous and they could, do really good agriculture with it. But actually, it is all here. So for me, I find this stuff really exciting in the sense that I'm like, oh, okay, I'll have a read of this and see what they're saying in terms of the electricity. And then I saw this one and I saw your post on the breweries in America and artificial refrigeration and the architecture of 19th century American breweries, talking about the development of the architecture and this tech of this artificial refrigeration. And just skim through it. And it talks about how they got taller, how they had cooling in underground cellars. There's so many images and stuff in here, and it goes all the way through. And this is just an amazing resource because this is where I'm picking up a lot of information on how they did things. Anyway, I just thought you might find this interesting because they got all these journals. So this is the construction history. I mean, some of this stuff's no good, but some of it can be. And I just go through here and look at these articles. So French influence and the founding of American civil and military engineering. That sounds like something that'd be really interesting.
With the pushback on stuff like that, typically it's, well, all that information was faked. You're looking at their sources, which, yeah, I mean, I do feel like that's a cop-out. Why is that information inaccurate, but your ideas have more merit than that? I mean, yeah, if someone's really going to debunk all that stuff, then they have to go into it and they have to understand it, and then they have to start picking it apart. But I guess that's kind of the free pass that the particular research gets, is you don't have to go through that stuff because it's all fake. Math was a subject in school. If it wasn't, history is all fake, and this topic was to switch to a different subject, it's like saying, well, hey, we're researching math. All math is fake, so you don't need to know any of it before. And now we're just putting the puzzle back together. Have you watched the first season of Westworld from HBO?
No, I'd like to. I was talking to the girlfriend, actually. I think we're going to watch that.
Season 1 was the only one that really had any of my interest. But the Labyrinth is a huge mystery in that season. And what's going on is all these robots, when you scalp them, they have the labyrinth inked into the top of their scalps. And so there's this big mystery, what is the labyrinth? But essentially, it's the labyrinth is the mind. It's not this physical place, which is what the characters were trying to find. They were trying to find the physical labyrinth. Where's the entrance to it?
Yeah, that's something that's come up in my research a lot, that the labyrinth is the mind, and it's also like a spiritual thing, a kind of that maybe isn't actually like a contraption to get you lost, but to actually like find something. I'm deep in a labyrinth of all this stuff. I'm trying to work it out, but it's an interesting metaphor and image because it comes up so much, and it is on these cathedral floors, some of them. That one in France, Chartres, you just think, what? Why did they put that there, and what did it symbolically mean? The nature of that book is that the Umberto Eco one is that they're finding connections because they're kind of inventing them. Again, the mind projecting those connections. And I think that's a big thing with this conspiracy. You might connect a lot of really good dots and it might sound great, but it could actually just be the imagination. Would you say you're done with the topic of architecture and history and things like that?
We've heard of architects for 9/11. Where have architects for impossible architecture been hiding for centuries? Centuries. None of these guys could figure that out, but the generation with the access to the internet, they crack the code. It doesn't add up.
No, it doesn't. I've kind of got a bit exhausted with following the news. I don't know if you go through.
I do daily. It's the only thing I have time to do is I go on Daily Mail and just see what's going on. What are they putting out?
What do you feel like this winter? It's gonna sort of.
They've been saying that forever. I'm tuned out. I'm done. Because at this point, and going back to how we're antennas and we're creating our reality, we're outputting our reality, and they need you to listen to this stuff. They need you to choose a side. That's why I'm just so flabbergasted with the Trump supporters, because it's all in the same box. And I do lean more towards the conservatives than I do the liberals. And I completely considered myself a liberal at one point in time in my 20s. But in my 30s, I lean way more conservative because I look at what's going on with the liberals and it's like, y'all are completely out of your mind. Like it's creepy how insane you've become. And it's all thanks to technology. It's all thanks to the internet that has pumped your head full of these ideas and brought out these emotions in you. And now you're creating this mentally unbalanced reality. But I have that same perspective with the right. How can you put so much faith into this corrupt human being? Like all you got to do is look at Trump's history from the 80s, the 90s. He's not a good person. He's funny.
Funny how? I mean, what's funny about it?
Tommy, no, you got it all wrong.
Oh, Anthony. He's a big boy. He knows what he said. What'd you say?
You're right.
Funny how? What?
You're funny.
You mean,
So?
well, let me understand this, because maybe it's me, I'm a little fucked up, maybe. But I'm funny how? I mean, funny like I'm a clown, I amuse you? I make you laugh? I'm here to fucking amuse you? What do you mean funny? Funny how? How am I funny?
Because he's a clown, just like they all are. So we have to vote for the people who went through the initiations, which is get along to go along. They'll say the words that you want to hear, but it's all just to get you to go on a side because it's wrestling. It is a mere version of wrestling and kayfabe. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that term and how it was used in wrestling. I'm a huge wrestling fan, by the way.
Oh, right. No, I know wrestling. I don't know kayfabe, but...
So, yeah, the reason why people believed wrestling was real was because of kayfabe. If you were enemies with another wrestler, that existed outside of the ring. You were never allowed to go to a barbecue with that individual. You were never allowed to be seen in public as friends with that individual. That's what kept the illusion going, and that's why people actually believed wrestling was real, or at least that illusion of it was to be there. And it really wasn't even until the early 90s where there was actual like CBS news segments taking place saying wrestling's fake.
And fake violence in the wrestling ring led to this real-life brutality.
I think this is fake.
You think it's fake? What's that? Is that fake? Huh? What the hell's wrong with you? That's open hand slap, huh? You think it's fake? You come easy. Huh? What do you mean? Fake.
I mean, it is all just a facade. But it's easy, I suppose, for people to get wrapped up in it, and that's why I stay away from it. You know, over here, I mean, our politics are just so boring over here. You wouldn't even bother getting involved.
You know, you guys have been doing it longer.
Yeah, it's exactly like you say. It's all a big theatre. I can't agree that everyone is part of this thing. And I have like a soft spot for like academics. You know, even like Jordan Peterson, I quite like him. He's a smart guy, you know, he's very smart. I don't believe he's, you know, one of them. Maybe he is. Maybe I'm just ignorant, but...
That's another issue with conspiracy theory is how can you come out here and claim you know something about someone when you've never shook their hand? You've never had a conversation with them.
Do like your friends and family read your comments? Do they know you have a channel and stuff?
They know I have a channel, but I haven't told them about it. I haven't been like, hey, it's called Wooden Nickels. Check it out. I knew to keep them separate. I do have some friends that used to watch it. I don't think there's so much into it anymore, but they were fascinated by the mud flood topic just as I was. Two of them told me they were having a conversation one day where they were like, think about how cool it would be that there would be a mud flood ride at Disney, just in a building, and all of a sudden just all crisis starts taking place. I mean, they kind of already have rides like that with Earthquake. But yeah, I knew with the family, just keep them separated from this. And my dad is a geologist. And when I came into this, I came in really hard to melted buildings and all geology as a cover up. And one of my friends who had watched the channel be like, why don't you just talk to your dad about this stuff? Like get his take. And I was like, you know what? I'm not going to. And that really, I guess, kind of shows how unwilling I was to hear what the mainstream had to say. And my dad has tons of really dope crystals from being out in the world. You know, he didn't go and buy it at a shop or a street fair. He found that stuff on his journeys. We went to his old college, but what I was telling him, you know, we were driving through, and I was like, you see how it's on a hill? What I believe is going on is that's a buried civilization under there, and this new one that's built on top of it, we didn't even build that one. And his response to that was, I think you're gonna be very disappointed one day with your theory. I still do believe that there is a buried world below our feet. I do think civilizations are built on top of one after the other, but I don't buy into the idea that we didn't build the current one that is on the surface, or that it was a mud flood event that covered it up.
And then you've got the cleanup after. I mean,
it's too much mental gymnastics.
My family, I don't think they watch my stuff anymore. I think they all kind of got sick of me. I remember my dad, I remember saying to him, and he's showing him some of the videos, and he kind of switched off after, but we were out and about, and I said, like, you know, we can't build this stuff anymore. And he just said, like, mate, they had skills back then. And he's just right, you know, that they did. I mean, he's actually in construction, well, kind of a related element to it, but it's just, yeah, he was having none of it.
The oral history that we do have is these generations were tough, and they compare it to today, and they're like, it's not the same. This is a soft generation. And the soft generation is looking back at the tough one and being like, nah, you guys couldn't do anything. You know how I know? Because the same URLs that I go to visit porn and jack off to, I can search other stuff in there, and you didn't do it.
I mean, that's pretty much it, isn't it?
We've come to a point where now we're trashed on Tartaria again. Fuck.
But this is the thing. It's kind of, this is what I keep saying to the girlfriend. I say like, I want to leave this alone and just crack on with my, the new direction and new research. But I can't help myself.
Well, this could be a good segue if you want to talk about the drama. And I say drama because that really is what it feels like. It should be a debate, but you've got one side of the party that's digressed into name calling. So I do feel it's drama. It's
become absurd, really. Levy actually addressed the criticism that I provided in that brick video, and he said, I'm under attack, and the photograph he shows is not the same site. There's curvature in this photograph. So I thought, okay, fine, I'm going to leave it there, and people can go and check out the archive and make up their own mind. And then a few days ago, he brought it up again. And I mean, if I knew I was going to upset him so much, I probably wouldn't have done it. But I thought, okay, good, he's going to go through the photographs. He's taken the criticism on board. What followed blew my mind. And I'm still kind of flabbergasted by it. He starts with saying it's upsetting to hear people spread lies. Lies are evil. So he's going to shed the big light on the evil. And then he said, it seems like this library has done their best to scatter these photos. Instead of giving us a nice tidy collection, they're just scattered. So we're going to go through every single one of them today. Now, in the description box, I put a link to the archive. And this was originally my pinned comment. I changed it for this one, so I liked it, but it's also there. So we click on that. So this is all the photographs. So they're not scattered. And in the video, he's on this one or a different one, I don't know. And he's reading all this stuff here, but he's still emphasizing that they've done their best to hide it. They're scattered. Now look, sunny side, just a click, brings up 3,000 results, format, image. You got 190. Now you can refine it even more and say Coke, and you get even more. So, I'm a bit confused. And he didn't go through all these photographs, so off the bat, he's making promises that he didn't uphold. And here's one of the kilns in a straight line. Half of them have been demolished. This other half over here obviously hasn't. So it's a transition photograph. There's one or two things going on here. The first is that there's a complete deficiency when it comes to researchability. I mean, what? You cannot undertake something as simple as an archive search. Or, once again, it's careful selectivity. So, and that was what my original criticism was about, selectivity when it comes to presenting the viewer with information. It's cherry picking, or, even for want of a better phrase, it's lying to achieve a desired outcome. He's saying they're scattered, that they've been deliberately scattered, and that's just not true. So if it's the first option, just this lack of researchability, then, it does raise questions like, should you really be trying to debunk history? If you were struggling to find these images, like, what else have you missed? It also completely tarnishes the reputation of everyone in this game. Like, he's the biggest name in the Tartaria community. If he's saying this and outsiders are watching the videos, think, I'm gonna go check out the archive of the Coke kilns, and they just go to the search function. But he's out here saying he struggled and the archive has deliberately scattered them. But then if it's the second option, the selectivity, then he's like deliberately engaged with constructive criticism in a defensive manner, only to then be selective again. But this time, its purpose was to influence his viewers against a person who provided the criticism. In other words, it's a smear. We all make mistakes. I wouldn't want to, put out a message that you have to get it right before you put out a video, because that's just not what I'm saying. We all mess up. And to accuse someone of being evil and then to pull a move like that. And I think it's a second option, the selectivity, because in the video when he's looking at Google Earth, but you can see up here, it's been destroyed. So this is a site that once was, but down here, there is an imprint of curvature. And there's a closer one. You can see there's like bricks, or it might even be an old railway. There is remains here. So to just say there's more to this site, but then deny the fact that this curvature could have been there and, the railways could have been there and it could have looked like that. It's just selective. He constantly insists on saying he doesn't know. and doesn't have all the answers. But like somehow within all that vagueness, he does insist that our ancestors couldn't have built something as simple as a brick kiln. It's never, you know, I don't know, perhaps they could build great things with this guy. He calls the workers in this latest video as well, where, you know, he's calling me names, which, you know, is fine. But he calls the workers, you know, something like bottom of the barrel. He takes the mick out of the guy with the bricks and his thumb up. And I've noticed as well, actually, in his last few episodes, he calls a lot of the construction that he does think that is possible to build. He calls it stupid. But all the while, he's presenting bottom of the barrel research. He's insisting the images are scattered, and they're not. So again, it just appears, you know, amateur, it appears deficient, and it's disrespectful. The site was decommissioned in, I think, 1959. It was late 50s, I think. And, you know, he calls me names. He says, oh, your history's pet. This is the new one. I quite like the Darth Vader. I think we keep that one going because, you know, it does, like we said before, he kills the Emperor at the end. But history's pet, I mean, I'm not going to lie. I have become quite protective over European and English history. And it's just the way it's gone. At least have that ethic there with it. But saying that, there is one thing in the video that I do agree with. And that's when he says he hasn't gone to the site himself. That is important. And I completely agree. I haven't gone there. But that's exactly what I was saying with the pivot, with LHFE End, is that I wanted to focus on England and Europe because I can go there. And the community criticized the life out of me for that. But now he seems to agree. He sees why that's important. So, you know, I'm hoping he sticks to it. And the thing is, I'm not saying there's no hidden history around those kilns or Sunnyside. There very well could be. But another thing that you just notice is that his argument always hinges on these photographs being fake. So these construction photographs, they're all whitewashed guys or whatever, but not this one. This one, we like this one. And why? Because it shows Abu Simbel, and perhaps they faked this. So this works for their argument. And you've done a quality video on this. The skies are whitewashed. They don't look any different from the other photographs. In a way, they're almost worse quality. You know, you see the moon landing. I mean, it just looks so fake. But these photographs don't. So I think it's forever a weak argument. There's never any willingness to consider that a lot of these photographs are real. It's just this rigid denialism. So I think with this Levy thing, you know, I think it's getting out of hand, and it was just constructive criticism that you could carry on forward. It wasn't this thing that, you know, I wanted to have a beef or anything like that. So this is the last time I'm going to respond to Levy. And, you know, and after listening to this latest one and listening to the way he speaks about me with the name calling and the way, you know, he speaks about people in the photographs, it's a good thing for me because I can say that I'm definitely proud for making that pivot. I'm proud I've left the Taria stuff behind. It's just one of the best decisions I've made because, you know, I've now seen it for what it is.
Look, my channel wouldn't be where it is today without this individual having given me a shout out. So I'm thankful for that. I don't want any beef myself. I do agree that there's a lack of transparency. And I think for me, there's always this kind of desire to want to put some information out because I do know that there is that shared audience. And I do know a lot of these people don't have the time to research this stuff on their own. So when I do see stuff, it's hard to not want to comment. And I know there are tons of things that this individual and I would agree on, such as buried old civilizations, resets. There are elements of history being a lie. And at the end of the day, I do want everyone to achieve their goals. I want them to experience happiness as much as possible. I know these individuals aren't responsible for geoengineering. I know they're not responsible for putting policies in place that are making other people's lives worse. So I know they're not the enemy. And that's all I got.
No, yeah, well said, I think. Yeah. And I'm hoping it does stop because I just can't, yeah, it's too much, you know, it's a bit weird.
So the CIA actually came out and admitted that they erased and rewrote some of our history. And that history is of the Tartarian Empire. So Tartaria was thought to be a global and technologically advanced civilization that existed way before the 1800s up until the 1900s, where it was wiped out by a great reset, aka the mud flood. And it was completely erased from the history books and rewritten in order to hide us from the truth. Now I know this sounds crazy and you're probably already running into the comments to call me some name, but I brought the receipts. Comes directly from the CIA's website. It was released in 1957. The Central Committee of the Communist Party issued a directive ordering the party's Tartar Provincial Committee to proceed to a scientific revision of the history of Tartaria. In other words, Tartar history was to be rewritten. Let us be frank, was to be falsified. I don't know if I'm saying Tartar right. And why would Tartaria be depicted in old world maps if it wasn't a thing? And Putin actually wants to release the real history of Tartaria. Now take a look at some of these buildings. We were told that these were built by people that rode in horse and buggies. We're expected to believe that they built things like this with a hammer and a chisel. Like, even if scaffolding was a thing, the precision, the accuracy. These people were way more advanced than we give them credit for. Like, these buildings are said to have been built in the 1800s. And just look at some of these inventions that they had. The methane and...
There's someone in here though that's saying they should watch your videos, not your recent ones, your old ones.
Right.